Hi, I'm John Twist of University Motors, and after a couple of people wrote in and said, geez, all this stuff about MGBs, why not something about T-types? Well, today we've got a T-type engine here which is leaking oil. No surprise to you, I suppose, but you know, there's always a reason that these things leak oil. And the four reasons that they leak oil are just passive leaks because gaskets are faulty, or second, we have pressure leaks. And by that, I mean the evaporative loss control system, or PCV system, is plugged, hard to do on a T-type engine, and the whole inside of the engine pressurizes and blows the oil out of wherever it can. Third, we have oil pressure leaks, true oil pressure, from the oil pressure galleries. And fourth, we've got the rear main seal, or a couple other things back underneath the flywheel. So Danny's going to point the camera down on the engine. Let me point out some stuff. First of all, we've got the oil, the valve cover gasket up here at the top. The proper way to install this, and I love the Moss thick cork seals, is to affix it to the top of the cylinder head with silicone, then paint the top of it with grease and tighten down the valve cover onto it. Now sometimes out of the top here it'll leak a little bit. You can see it leaking, you can see the runs of oil. The racers will tell you that out on the track that this valve cover will fill all the way up with oil because the return holes are so small and there's such a lot of oil being delivered to the valve assembly. The next place is the side cover. This great big side cover here along the side, and that's got a great big cork gasket, but that doesn't leak very much. We've got the front seal up at the front of the engine and the gaskets, so forth. Now we've got this large oil draft tube that is as big around as my thumb. There's no way in the world that the inside of the engine can pressurize if this system is in place and the cork gasket is properly mounted. But if you've got an aftermarket side cover with a little crested MG on the side, that can plug up and it causes the whole inside of the engine to pressurize, and the pressure can't get out. That's the pressure, the blow-by that gets past the piston rings. And when that pressurizes the inside of the engine, let me tell you, it blows oil out of everywhere and there's no way to stop it. The next one is oil pressure leaks. Actually oil pressure, and you can have a loose fitting up here, fitting that's been cut on an angle. You got your oil pressure hose here. Boy, this thing's an original hose here. It goes down to the bottom, that can leak. And all around down here on the oil pump, and the oil filter housing, there's a lot of possibilities for leaks. Now the sump gasket itself doesn't leak, but where the sump attaches to the bottom of the main cap, in back it'll leak. So we're going to go over and take a look at an engine and a sump and talk a little bit more about the rear main seal. So here we are with the engine block, which is upside down. So you either have to imagine this right side up or take your monitor right now and turn that upside down so you can see what I'm doing. Anyway, this is the top of the block, this is the bottom of the block. Here's the rear seal. Excuse me, it's not really a seal. Now, there's a couple different ways that oil can get into the bell housing and drip out. One is it can come out of the gearbox. That's hardly ever. One, it can come off this big plug here. You see someone's glued this up. This on the back of the rear cam bearing. That can be dislodged, and if it's kicked out of the way, you get a tremendous amount of oil dripping out here towards the bottom. Here's your main oil gallery. Someone's gooed this all up. A nasty mess here. This kind of gooing usually doesn't help anything. And if that's not tight, you can get an oil pressure leak out behind the flywheel, and you end up having to virtually disassemble the entire engine to take care of this stuff. But what we came to talk about was this rear slinger. Now on the crankshaft, Danny's going to tighten down here on the crankshaft, we have the scroll thread. And as the crankshaft turns in a clockwise direction, the thread screws the oil towards the front of the engine. Now the oil's coming down here into the main bearing, where through a cross drill and it comes up to the rod. Some of the oil that hits the main bearing splashes out and falls into the sump out the front here. Some of it hits the back and hits this deflector, and by hitting the deflector, let me try to get this thing, should have had this thing loose, hits the deflector and the oil drips into here and drips out of here into the sump. But there's always a little bit of oil that gets past the deflector and gets into the back. Now that scroll thread here runs about 3/1000ths of an inch away from this surface and the complementary surface over here on the block, again trapping the oil so the oil can go back down. But you probably can't see, there's a bunch of lines on this, and that's from wear. And if I run my finger across here, it's no longer smooth, it's grooved, which means that the crankshaft has been sitting down too far, maybe because of bearing wear, maybe, and that's all buggered up here. So to get this thing so that it doesn't leak out of the back end, and that of course is always the trick, you can buy the Moss rear seal, designed by Alan Moss, but it's very, very tricky. Let me be firm about that. You can do it. I've done it on all 5 that I've installed, but it's very, very critical. You have to have a lot of patience and tooling and so forth. Anyway, the other way to do it is to get the bottom end of the engine align board or align honed, A-L-I-G-N, align honed, where they skim a little bit of distance off the cap here, put the cap back on, and then spin this hole out all the way through so that the saddles are all in line. And then secondly, open up this distance here so that that is just 3/1000ths larger on the side than the scroll thread here on the crank. And that will allow the oil to get screwed in. If it's larger than that, the oil squirts out. If it's smaller than that, the oil is sucked out by capillary action. My preference is to get the bottom end of the engine a line board, but it's not a positive seal. It'll always leak a little bit. Anyway, this is the XPAG engine. Remember, it's X for X series, P for pushrod, A for 1250 cc's, and G for MG. There's a Morris engine that's the same, that's an XPAM, and there's a Wolseley engine that's the same, that's an XPAW. I hope this has been helpful. We've talked about oil leaks in these engines, and they're either because the gaskets are bad and are leaking passively, or it's because the inside of the engine is pressurized because of blow-by and can't vent. It's from a pressure leak someplace loose on the side, or it's because of the rear seal. And it's always a combination of all 4. You can go to Napa, you can buy oil dye and put the dye into the engine. Borrow your kid's blacklight or retrieve yours from the closet from when you looked at blacklight posters 40 years ago, and train it around the engine and find the oil leak, because this oil dye that's sold under a ball camp part number becomes absolutely fluorescent under blacklight. I hope I've helped you out today, and send us some more notes and letters. We'll try to do some more stuff with some of the earlier cars. Be sure to send us some work. Right? I don't want to sound like Starvin' Marvin on your way to Florida, but stop. We need your business. See you guys tomorrow.